The storm that tore through New Meridian's industrial district that night didn't follow any natural patterns. Kessa Thorne had lived through enough planetary weather cycles to know when something was fundamentally wrong with the sky. The lightning crackled in perfect geometric shapes, and the rain fell upward for exactly 17 seconds before gravity remembered its job. She found the warrior at dawn, half buried beneath a collapsed section of her scrapyard's perimeter fence. At first glance, Kessa assumed it was another refugee from the outer colonies. They'd been streaming in for weeks, carrying tailies of entire worlds going silent, communication arrays simply stopping mid-transmission. But this one was different. The figure wore armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, crafted from materials that made Kessa's scanner emit confused beeps. More striking were the augmentations, sleek metallic ports along the spine, neural interfaces that gleamed like silver tears beneath close-cropped dark hair, and hands that terminated in fingertips of some crystalline substance she'd never encountered. But it was the weapon that made her breath catch. The blade lay 3 meters away, as if it had been thrown or dropped during the warrior's fall. It resembled a sword in the way that lightning resembles a candle, technically similar, but operating on entirely different principles. The grip was formed from what looked like living metal, pulsing slowly with bioluminescent veins. The blade itself wasn't solid. It was a contained field of energy that shifted between deep purple and absolute black, humming with a frequency that made her teeth ache. Kessa approached carefully. In her 15 years of salvage work, she'd learned that glowing things in the ruins either exploded or tried to rewrite your DNA. Sometimes both. The warrior stirred as she drew near, consciousness returning in stages. First came awareness eyes, snapping open to reveal irises of the same shifting energy as the blade. Then recognition of surroundings, a quick professional assessment that cataloged every exit, weapon, and potential threat. Finally, desperate searching hands patting the ground, panic creeping into those strange eyes. Looking for this? Kessa asked, nodding toward the energy blade. The warrior's gaze locked onto the weapon, relief flooding their features. They tried to rise, stumbled, and accepted Kessa's offered hand with reluctant gratitude. "I am called Valdris," the warrior said, voice carrying an accent Kessa couldn't place. "That blade, ... it cannot be left unattended," seemed pretty quiet. "To me," Kessa replied, though she noticed her salvage equipment had arranged itself in perfect symmetrical patterns around the weapon, as if drawn by some invisible force. Valdris moved toward the blade with obvious pain, each step calculated. "You do not understand. It remembers every battle it has witnessed, every life it has taken. Without a wielder's consciousness to guide it, it begins to ... echo, as if responding." To the words, the weapon's hum shifted to a lower frequency. The air around it started to shimmer, and Kessa could swear she heard distant sounds, metal clashing against metal, voices raised in combat, the particular silence that follows screaming. "Echo what, exactly?" she asked, backing away as the temperature dropped noticeably. "The last moments," Valdris whispered, reaching for the grip. "The final seconds of every battlefield it has known." Their fingers closed around the weapon, and everything changed. The scrapyard vanished. In its place stretched a vast plain under an alien sky, littered with the remnants of some massive conflict. Weapons lay abandoned, armor scattered like discarded. Shells, and in the distance, the skeletal remains of war machines reached toward the horizon, but no bodies, no movement. Only the profound quiet that follows the end of everything. Kessa stood in the center of it all, untouched by the vision, but somehow understanding that she was witnessing something that had happened long ago, far away. Valdris knelt beside her, the blade now steady in their grasp, tears streaming down. Their face, "This is what it remembers," they said softly. The silence after. When the fighting stops, when the causes are forgotten, when only the quiet remains. The vision faded, returning them to the mundane reality of twisted metal and morning light. But the silence lingered, heavy with implications Kessa didn't yet understand. "What are you?" she asked. Valdris stood, the blade now calm against their back. "The last of the Resonance Guard. And this weapon, it's not just remembering battles." They looked directly at her, those energy-filled eyes burning with purpose and sorrow. "It's calling them home." The archive of forgotten worlds hung in the void between star systems, a massive structure built from the hulks of dead ships and powered by the dying breath of a collapsed star. Joran Vex had called it home for 7 years, ever since the Scholastic. Order had exiled him for pursuing dangerous knowledge. He floated in the central chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing fragments of lost civilizations when the transmission arrived. The message was brief coordinates, a single image of an energy blade, and a name, Valdris. Joran's blood went cold. He knew that name from texts so ancient. They were written in quantum script, their meaning shifting with each reading. The Resonance Guard had been myth, legend, the subject of academic papers that got their authors quietly disappeared. 3 days later, his research vessel Memento docked with the salvage hauler at the edge of the Meridian system. Kessa Thorne met him at the airlock, her weathered face grim with concern. "Your friend won't wake up," she said without preamble. "Been unconscious for 48 hours. But the sword, it's been getting more active." She led him through the ship's cramped corridors to the medical bay, where Valdris lay motionless on a biobed. The energy blade rested in a containment field nearby, its surface rippling with patterns that hurt to look at directly. "May I?" Joran asked, reaching toward the containment controls. "You're the expert," Kessa replied, though her hand drifted to the plasma cutter at her belt. The moment the field deactivated, the blade's hum filled the room. But this time, instead of the low, threatening frequency Kessa had described, it resonated at a pitch that seemed to bypass Joran's ears entirely, speaking directly to his mind. "Remember," it whispered. "Remember what was lost." The first vision hit him like a physical blow. He stood on the observation deck of a massive space station, watching as an entire fleet materialized from hyperspace. Ships of impossible design, their hulls covered in the same energy matrices as the blade, arranged in formations that defied tactical logic. "The Silence Fleet," he breathed, recognizing descriptions from the most classified archives. They were real. The vision shifted. Now he stood in a war room, where figures in resonance armor debated strategy. Their voices overlapped, creating harmonics that seemed to bend reality around them. He caught fragments of their conversation, something about the quiet protocol and necessary sacrifice. They chose silence, the blade continued. When the war could not be won, they chose silence. Over defeat, more images flooded his consciousness. Entire star systems going dark, not from destruction, but from some kind of voluntary cessation. Planets where every living thing simply stopped, not dead but waiting, suspended in a state between existence and void. The recent silence zones. Joran gasped, his academic mind making connections. The worlds that have gone quiet, it's happening again. The protocol was never completed, the blade confirmed. The last guardian fell before the final note could be sung. But the song remembers itself. It seeks completion. Valdris stirred on the biobed, their eyes opening to reveal depths of exhaustion that seemed to encompass centuries. "You understand." "Now," they said weakly. "The blade doesn't just remember battles. It remembers the choice that ended them all." Joran's hands shook as he backed away from the weapon. The Resonance Guard didn't lose their war. They transcended it. They found a way to end all conflict by ending everything. "Not everything," Valdris corrected, struggling to sit up. "They left guardians." watchers to ensure the silence held. But we are dying out, and the protocol grows stronger. It seeks to complete what was begun. Kessa looked between them, her practical mind rejecting what she was hearing. You're talking about some kind of doomsday weapon disguised as philosophy. I'm talking about the ultimate peace, Valdris replied. A galaxy where no shot is fired, because no one remains to fire it. The Resonance Guard believed it was mercy. The blade pulsed brighter, and suddenly the medical bay was filled with ghostly figures, warriors in energy armor, their faces serene with absolute certainty. They moved through the space like memory made manifest, their lips moving in silent song. The choice approaches, they seemed to say. The final guardian must decide. Completion or continuation. Silence or struggle. JOR in Watch the Phantoms with. Growing horror and fascination. How many worlds have you already claimed? 17 systems rest in quiet. Peace absolute. But the song requires more voices to reach its crescendo. Soon, all will join the eternal silence. The visions faded, leaving the three of them alone with the humming blade and the weight of impossible knowledge. We have to warn someone, Kessa said finally. Valdris shook their head. Warn them of what? That peace is coming? That all their wars and suffering will end? Many would welcome it. That's not peace, Joran said quietly. That's extinction with better marketing. He looked at the blade, its surface now showing reflections of empty worlds, silent cities, monuments to a tranquility that would never be broken because nothing remained to break it. The question, he continued, is whether we're already too late to stop it. The blade's hum shifted to a new frequency, almost like laughter. In the distance, space itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for an answer that would determine whether the galaxy would continue its chaotic, violent, beautiful existence, or join the perfect quiet of the void. The Whisper's Edge wasn't the fastest ship in the Outer Rim, but Captain Nira Solis had never met a cargo she couldn't deliver or a blockade she couldn't slip through. Her cybernetic implants, legacy of a mining accident that had cost her left, arm and half her nervous system, let her interface directly with the ship's systems. When she flew, she didn't just pilot the vessel, she became it. That intimacy made her immediately aware that something was wrong the moment. Joran Vex brought his cargo aboard. Just transport, the scholar had said, sliding a credit chip across. The table at Meridian Station. No questions, no scans, no records. Can you do that? Nira had done worse for less money. But now, 3 hours into hyperspace, every system on her ship was behaving strangely. Navigation plotted courses to star charts that didn't exist. Environmental controls hummed lullabies in frequencies that made her teeth ache. Even her coffee maker seemed to be composing poetry in binary dot. She found Vex in the cargo hold, staring at the containment unit that held their mysterious package. The scholar looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually neat appearance disheveled with worry. What exactly am I carrying? She demanded. Something that should probably be launched into a black hole, he replied without looking at her. But we're taking it to someone who might know how to shut it down instead. The containment unit was standard design, built to hold hazardous materials or sensitive equipment. But as Nira approached, her cybernetic systems registered something that made no sense. The container wasn't just holding something. It was resonating with it, amplifying whatever lay inside. My ship is singing, she said flatly, and not in a good way. My neural interfaces are picking up patterns that shouldn't exist. Vex finally turned to face her. The blade bonds with technology. It learns, adapts, seeks connection. Your cybernetics make you particularly ... receptive. Before she could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. Nira's consciousness snapped back to the bridge through her neural link. accessing sensors and tactical displays with thought-speed reflexes. 3 ships had dropped out of hyperspace behind them, sleek, predatory vessels of unfamiliar design. Their hulls were dark as space itself, and they moved with impossible coordination, like fingers of the same hand. "Friends of yours?" she called back to Vex. "Silence seekers," came his voice over the comm, tight with fear. "They hunt anything connected to the resonance guard. They want to complete the protocol." The lead vessel opened fire, not with conventional weapons, but with beams of absolute darkness that seemed to devour light itself. The Whisper's Edge shuddered as reality warped around the impact points. Nira threw the ship into evasive maneuvers, her enhanced reflexes pushing the vessel beyond its design limits. But the enemy craft matched every turn, every roll, as if they could predict her movements. Then the containment unit in the cargo hold cracked, the moment the energy blade was exposed to the Whisper's Edge's systems. Everything changed. Nira felt the weapon's consciousness touch her cybernetics, not invasively, but like a question being asked. She could sense its vast memory, the weight of countless battles, the echo of civilizations that had chosen silence over struggle. "You understand machines," it whispered through her neural implants. "Show me how they dream." Without conscious thought, Nira opened her interface fully, letting the blade's alien intelligence flow through her ship's systems. The result was immediate and terrifying. The Whisper's Edge began to transform. Hull plates shifted and reconfigured, forming new geometries that made space itself seem more navigable. Engines that had been merely fast became something beyond velocity. They bent distance rather than crossing it. Weapon systems evolved from crude projectile launchers into instruments of reality manipulation. And through it all, Nira remained connected, feeling her ship become something unprecedented, part vessel, part weapon, part living extension of an ancient will. The Silence Seekers fired again, their dark beams converging on the transformed ship. But the Whisper's Edge simply wasn't there anymore, existing in the spaces between moments, moving through dimensions that had no names. That Nir found herself piloting not just through space, but through possibility itself. She could see every potential course, every outcome, every decision tree branching into infinity. The blade's influence showed her how to navigate probability. Like a 3-dimensional map. She struck back. The transformed ship's weapons didn't fire energy or projectiles, fired silence itself. Where the beams touched the Silence Seeker's vessels, systems simply stopped. Not destroyed, not damaged, but ceased, as if they had never been activated in the first place. One by one, the enemy ships went dark and drifted, their crews trapped in the same perfect quiet they had sought to impose on others. As the immediate threat ended, Nira gradually disconnected from the deep interface, feeling the ship slowly return to its original configuration. But the changes weren't entirely reversed. The Whisper's Edge retained some of its new capabilities, and she could sense that she had been changed as well. "What did you do to us?" Vex asked, appearing on the bridge with wide eyes and trembling hands. "I let it show me what my ship could become," Nira replied, studying readings that made no sense according to standard physics. "But Vex... I think it was showing me what I could become too." She looked at her hands, still flesh and cybernetics, but somehow more than they had been before. Through her neural link, she could feel the blade calling from the cargo hold, not demanding but inviting. "The protocol needs completion," it whispered, "but completion does not require ending. It requires understanding. Show others what you have seen. Let them choose." "It's not trying to force silence on the galaxy," she realized aloud. "It's trying to offer a choice. But the Silence Seekers, the original guard, they've corrupted the message. They think peace means death." Vex nodded grimly. "And every world that goes quiet brings them closer to critical mass. When enough systems join the silence, The choice will be made for everyone. Nira set course for their destination, but her mind was already working on a different problem. The blade had bonded with her ship, yes, but more importantly, it had shown her that technology and consciousness could merge without one consuming the other. Maybe, she said quietly, we don't have to choose between struggle and silence. Maybe there's a third option. Behind them, space folded back to normal, leaving the drifting silence-seeker vessels as silent monuments to their own philosophy. But ahead lay questions that would determine whether the galaxy would find peace through understanding, or through the ultimate quiet of extinction. The abandoned city of Nethys had been quiet for 3 days when Dex Corrin arrived. Not the natural quiet of a place where people sleep or work in whispered concentration, but the absolute silence that comes when sound itself becomes dangerous. Dex had been hunting the Whisperers for 2 years, ever since they'd consumed his home colony of Valdara. These creatures, if they could be called, that fed on sound and movement, leaving behind perfectly preserved but utterly lifeless worlds. Their victims weren't dead in any conventional sense. They were simply paused, trapped in the moment. Before their last breath, their last heartbeat, their last thought. Now the Whisperers had followed the energy blade to Nethys, drawn by its unique resonance. And somewhere in this tomb of a city, Nira Solis waited with the weapon that might be the galaxy's salvation or its final doom. Dex moved through the empty streets with practiced silence, each step calculated to avoid even the whisper of leather on stone. His modified combat suit absorbed sound waves, rendering him effectively invisible to the Whisperer's primary sense. But the effort required constant concentration, one moment of carelessness, one unguarded breath, and he would join the frozen population in their eternal pause. He found Nira in what had been the city's central plaza, sitting motionless beside a fountain where water hung suspended mid-splash. The energy blade lay across her knees, its surface darker than he'd expected, almost dormant. She didn't move as he approached, didn't even seem to breathe. For a moment, Dex feared he was too late, that the Whisperers had already claimed her. Then her eyes tracked to his position, and he saw the intelligence there, the careful calculation of someone playing a very dangerous game. She mouthed a single word: waiting. Dex settled into position behind a frozen vendor's stall, drawing his sound-dampened sidearm. The weapon fired coherent light rather than projectiles, making no noise and leaving no trace of its passage save for what it hit. They didn't have long to wait. The Whisperers came at dusk, flowing through the streets like liquid shadow. They had no fixed form, appearing sometimes as writhing darkness, sometimes as barely visible distortions in the air. But always they brought silence with them, a hungry quiet that devoured every vibration, every frequency, every tremor of life. The first one reached the plaza's edge and paused, its attention fixed on Nira and the blade. It moved closer, cautiously, as if sensing something different about this particular silence. That was when Nira spoke. "You're not what you used to be," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the dead air. "Once you served the Resonance Guard, helped them choose silence over suffering. But you've forgotten the purpose. You've become what they feared most: silence without choice." The Whisperer recoiled at the sound of her voice, its form rippling with what might have been confusion or anger. More of its kind emerged from the surrounding streets, drawn by the unprecedented noise in their perfect quiet domain. Dex raised his weapon, tracking the nearest creature, but held his fire. Something in Nira's posture told him to wait, to trust. Whatever plan she had conceived. "A blade remembers," she continued, lifting the weapon from her knees. "It remembers the original purpose. Not death disguised as peace, but true harmony. The choice to be quiet when quiet serves, to act when action is needed." The energy blade began to glow, but not with the aggressive light Dex had expected. Instead, It emitted a soft radiance that seemed to push back the hungry darkness of the whisperers without destroying them. "We bring peace," one of the creatures whispered, its voice like wind through empty rooms. "We end suffering by ending everything that suffers." "You bring ending," Nira replied, standing slowly. "But ending isn't peace. Peace is the choice to set down your weapon when the fight is over. Peace is the wisdom to know when silence serves and when it stifles." She raised the blade above her head, and suddenly the entire plaza was filled with light, not blinding, but illuminating, showing everything in perfect clarity. The frozen citizens, the waiting whisperers, the truth of what silence without choice really meant. "The protocol demands completion," the lead whisperer insisted, but its voice carried less certainty now. "The protocol was corrupted," Nira said firmly. "Look through the blade's memory. See what the Resonance Guard truly intended." The weapon's glow intensified, and suddenly the air was filled with ghostly figures. The original Guard, but not as the stern, silent warriors they had become in legend. These were people racked with grief, faced with an impossible choice. Watch the galaxy tear itself apart in endless war, or find a way to offer rest to those who could no longer bear the struggle. "We offered choice," the phantoms whispered. "Sanctuary for the weary, silence for those who sought it. But always choice, never compulsion." The whisperers writhed in apparent anguish as the truth washed over them. They had become the very thing their creators had opposed, an ending forced. Upon others, silence without consent. "We forgot," the lead creature whispered. "We forgot the choice. We brought only the ending." "You can remember," Nira said gently. "You can return to your true purpose. Offer rest to those who seek it, but let others choose their own path." One by one, the whisperers began to change, their hungry darkness transforming into something softer, less predatory. They moved through the plaza, touching the frozen citizens with tentacles of gentle shadow. And where they touched, life returned, not as an explosion of noise and motion, but as quiet awakening, each person given the choice of whether to remain in peaceful silence or return to the complex symphony of existence. Most chose to wake, but some, the very old, the deeply wounded, the utterly weary, chose to remain in the gentle quiet the reformed whisperers offered. And that, X realized, was as it should be. The plaza filled gradually with whispered conversations, soft footsteps, the gentle splash of the fountain resuming its flow. Not the chaotic noise of a city returning to life, but the measured rhythm of people choosing how much sound their world should hold. Nira lowered the blade, its glow fading to the barest shimmer. She looked across the plaza to where Dex crouched, behind his hiding place, and smiled. "The hunt is over," she called softly. "Now comes the harder part, teaching the galaxy that peace doesn't have to mean death." Dex emerged from cover, holstering his weapon. Around them, the city of Nethys began its careful resurrection, each sound a deliberate choice, each moment of silence a conscious gift rather than an imposed curse. The whisperers faded back into the shadows, but their presence felt different, now protective rather than predatory, offering sanctuary to those who needed it while leaving others free to make their own noise. "What happens now?" Dex asked. Nira looked at the energy blade, then at the gradually awakening city around them. "Now we find out if the galaxy is ready to choose its own level of peace," she said, "and hope that we've bought enough time for that choice to matter." The workshop of echoes existed in the space between realities, built into the skeleton of a dead star by engineers who understood that some repairs required more than tools and time. Zara Nightfall had inherited the facility from her mentor, along with the rare gift that made her invaluable to a galaxy filled with dying technologies. She could hear their songs. Every machine had a voice, from the simplest circuit to the most complex AI. Most people heard only noise. But Zara heard the melodies of purpose and function, the harmonies of systems working together, and most painfully, the dying notes of technologies reaching their end. Now she sat before the most complex song she had ever encountered. The energy blade rested on a crystal resonance platform, surrounded by diagnostic equipment that strained to understand its nature. But Zara didn't need instruments to know what she was dealing with. The weapon sang with the voices of an entire civilization, not just their technology, but their hopes, their fears, their final desperate attempt to find meaning in meaninglessness. Nira Solis stood nearby, watching as Zara worked. The pilot had brought the blade here after the incident at Nethys, hoping that someone who understood the deeper languages of technology might find a way to finally resolve the crisis it represented. "It's not a weapon," Zara said finally, her voice filled with wonder and sorrow. "It's a choir. Listen, ... She adjusted the resonance platform settings, and suddenly the workshop was filled with voices, thousands of them, singing in harmony. But these weren't the voices of the living. They were the final echoes of the Resonance Guard's creators, the civilization that had chosen silence over the endless cycle of war and suffering. "We were tired," the voices sang. "So very tired of watching worlds burn, of seeing children grow up only to die in conflicts that began before they were born. We sought an end to all endings, a peace that would make war impossible." "They didn't create the protocol to destroy," Zara whispered. "They created it to preserve. This blade doesn't just remember battles. It remembers the moments when people chose to stop fighting." The song continued, and through it, Zara began to understand the true nature of what they faced. The silence zones, the whisperers, the resonance guard, they were all part of a vast experiment in forced evolution, an attempt to push consciousness itself toward a state where conflict became impossible. But choice, the voices lamented, choice was always the missing element. "We gave our guardians the power to offer peace, but we forgot to teach them that peace must be chosen, not imposed." The original civilization isn't extinct, Zara realized with growing excitement. They're still here, preserved in the blade's matrix. Their consciousness, their knowledge, their regret, it's all here. She began to work with fevered intensity, her hands dancing over controls that most engineers would need years to understand. The workshop's systems responded to her touch like instruments in an orchestra, each one adding its voice to the growing symphony of discovery. "What are you doing?" Nira asked, watching displays fill with data patterns that resembled music more than technical readouts. "I'm giving them a chance to fix their mistake," Zara replied. "The blade isn't just a weapon or a memory storage device. It's a communication system. And right now, it's connected to every whisperer, every silence zone, every piece of resonance guard technology in the galaxy." She paused, looking at Nira with eyes bright with possibility and fear. "I can wake them up. The original creators. Give them direct control over their protocol. Let them correct what went wrong. But ... But, Nira prompted. "But once I do this, the choice won't be ours anymore. It will be theirs." The original civilization that was so tired of war they were, willing to end everything to stop it. We have to trust that they've learned something in all their years of silence. Nira considered this, remembering the reformed whisperers, the people who had chosen to remain in peaceful quiet at Nethys, the way the blade had shown her ship how to transform without losing its essential nature. "Do it," she said. Zara's hands moved to the final controls. The blade's song rose to a crescendo that filled not just the workshop, but seemed to echo across space itself, reaching out to every piece of resonance guard technology, every silence zone, every whisperer in the galaxy. And then, for one perfect moment, everything was quiet. Not the hungry silence of the whisperers, or the imposed peace of the protocol, but the expectant quiet of a held breath, a pause before the next movement of a vast symphony. When the voices returned, they were different, not the echoes of the past, but the active consciousness of beings awakening from a centuries-long dream of regret. "We understand now," they sang, their harmony richer and more complex than before. "Peace cannot be given. It can only be chosen. We offer choice, true choice, to every world, every being, every consciousness in the galaxy." The energy blade began to dissolve, its structure breaking down into motes of light that scattered through space faster than thought. But this wasn't destruction, it was distribution. Every particle carried the same message, the same opportunity. Across the galaxy, on worlds both silent and chaotic, beings suddenly found themselves faced with a choice they had never imagined possible. Not the choice between war and death, but between their current existence and something else, a state of consciousness where conflict was still possible but no longer necessary, where beings could choose their level of engagement with the struggles of existence. Some chose to continue as they always had, finding meaning in the complexity and chaos of mortal life. Others chose to step aside from the eternal dance of conflict and competition, moving into peaceful communities where violence was not forbidden, but simply unnecessary. And many chose something in between, remaining engaged with the world, but carrying within themselves a deeper understanding of when to fight and when to be still. The choice was made not once, but constantly, each being able to move between states as their needs and understanding evolved. The galaxy didn't become uniformly peaceful, but it became consciously peaceful, aware of its capacity for both struggle and serenity. In the workshop of echoes, Zara and Nira watched the transformation through sensors that showed not destruction but evolution, not ending but beginning. "Did we just save the galaxy or doom it?" Nira asked. Zara smiled, listening to the new symphony that filled space, not the song of dying technologies, but the harmony of consciousness choosing its own path. "We gave it the chance to decide for itself," she said. "That's all anyone can do." The workshop fell into comfortable silence, the kind that comes not from the absence of sound, but from the presence of perfect understanding. Outside, the galaxy continued its ancient dance of birth and death, war and peace, noise and quiet, but now it danced with full awareness of the steps it chose to take. And in that awareness, there was a kind of peace that needed no weapon to enforce it, no protocol to maintain it, no silence to preserve it. Just choice, freely given and freely taken, echoing across the stars like the last note of a song that would never truly end.